The ocean holds secrets that defy all logic. Vast waters, unexplored depths, mysteries that have baffled scientists, sailors, and travelers for centuries. Today, I invite you to join me on a 2-hour journey through the most chilling mysteries of the sea. Relax, open your mind, and get ready to dive into the secrets that lie beneath the waves. The Mary Celeste, the most enigmatic ghost ship in history. On the calm morning of December 5, 1872, as the British brig Dei Grazia sailed slowly through the cold, open waters of the Atlantic, some 600 kilometers off the coast of Portugal, the crew spotted a vessel adrift, moving without purpose, as if surrendered entirely to the whims of the ocean. And as they drew closer, the name painted on the stern became visible: Mary Celeste. A ship that, at first glance, appeared intact, its hull unbroken, its sails tattered but still partially set, showing no signs of battle, storm, or distress, yet radiating an unsettling aura of abandonment that sent a chill through the sailors' hearts. Captain David Morehouse, recognizing the ship as belonging to his friend and fellow captain, Benjamin Briggs, whom he had dined with in New York scarcely a month earlier, felt a deep, instinctive dread creep over him, and without hesitation, he ordered a boarding party, knowing in his gut that something terrible had occurred. As the sailors climbed aboard, they found the ship eerily silent. There was no trace of its 10-member crew, no struggle, no blood, no chaos. Only the ghostly remnants of life left behind in haste. A secured helm, waterlogged provisions, the ship's cargo of 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol untouched and accounted for, personal belongings of the crew still carefully stored, and in the captain's quarters, a child's toy left neatly on a bunk and a pocket watch glinting softly on a wooden table, all silent witnesses to a mystery that had already begun weaving itself into legend. The ship's log, meticulously maintained until November 25th, near the Azores, bore no entries of storms, sickness, mutiny, or trouble. There was nothing to explain why a seaworthy vessel would be found adrift, abandoned in calm seas, its only missing items a lifeboat, a few navigational instruments, and some food and water, suggesting that those on board had left deliberately but leaving open the haunting question: why? Speculation bloomed like wildfires across both the maritime world and the public imagination. Some suggested a violent mutiny or an attack by pirates who, inexplicably, chose not to steal anything. Others whispered about deadly vapors leaking from the alcohol cargo, prompting a panicked evacuation for fear of explosion, though no evidence of fire or damage supported this theory. Still others blamed sudden seaquakes, rogue waves, waterspouts, or phenomena even stranger, suggesting that madness, hallucinations, or some unknown atmospheric effect had driven the crew into the sea or led them to vanish into the mist without a struggle. Adding to the vessel's haunted reputation were the dark tales from its past. The Mary Celeste, previously named the Amazon, had suffered collisions, fires, and the mysterious death of its first captain even before her ill-fated voyage, and some sailors came to believe the ship was cursed, marked by an invisible hand that would not rest until her story was written in shadows and uncertainty. When the Mary Celeste was towed to Gibraltar, the ensuing salvage hearing only deepened the mystery. Suspicions of foul play swirled, investigators prodded at inconsistencies, yet no firm evidence of crime emerged, and ultimately, the case was closed without answers, allowing the ship to sail again under different owners, her hull carrying the weight of an unshakable, malevolent legend that would follow her to her final wreck off the coast of Haiti in 1885, an ignoble end orchestrated in a failed insurance fraud that seemed only fitting for a vessel whose very existence had become a symbol of unresolved tragedy. Today, more than a century later, the Mary Celeste drifts not on water, but through the foggy corridors of human memory and myth, a ghost ship whose silent voyage into the unknown continues to invite endless theories, countless retellings, and a quiet, unrelenting wonder. Somewhere beyond the horizon, beneath the rolling mists, perhaps the voices of Captain Briggs, his wife and child, and his faithful crew still call out, seeking to be heard across the ages, trying to tell a story that no one, then or now, has ever truly been able to understand. Bermeja Island, the territory that vanished from the sea. For centuries, sailors and cartographers faithfully depicted on their maps a small island located in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, Bermeja Island. Appearing consistently in official documents, navigational charts, and colonial reports, described as a reddish patch of land situated north of the Yucatan Peninsula and used as a vital reference point for maritime routes, a fixture in the geography of the known world, existing as a certainty for all who sailed those waters, waiting quietly to be sighted just beyond the horizon. Today, however, no trace of it remains. The first known mentions of Bermeja date back to the 16th century, appearing in maps drawn by Spanish cartographers such as Alonso de Santa Cruz. Later, it found its way into British, French, and American atlases, and although it was never particularly large or strategic in those early days, its presence was accepted as fact, its position marked without hesitation on charts well into the 20th century, including in important official Mexican documents. With the arrival of modern technology, high-resolution sonar, aerial photography, satellites, it was expected that Bermeja's existence could finally be confirmed with absolute certainty. Yet, when systematic explorations were undertaken, the island was nowhere to be found. No rocky formations, no sandbanks, no submerged mounds where it should have stood, only open, endless sea. What began as a geographical curiosity quickly escalated into a matter of state during the 1990s, when Mexico and the United States entered negotiations over the rights to a vast marine region known as the Donut Hole, a polygon rich in hydrocarbons. If Bermeja existed, Mexico could legally extend its exclusive economic zone and lay claim to a substantial portion of those valuable resources. But if it did not, the maritime boundary would shift in favor of the United States. Thus, Mexico organized several expeditions to locate the elusive island, sending military vessels and scientific teams equipped with cutting-edge technology, scouring the coordinates where Bermeja was supposed to rise. But the results were unequivocal. Bermeja was not there. Not merely submerged or eroded, but completely absent, leaving no geological evidence that it had ever existed at all. This finding unleashed a storm of theories. The most conventional explanation pointed to natural causes. Bermeja, perhaps, had been a low-lying island composed of sand or sediment, similar to coastal sandbanks that shift and vanish under the relentless forces of erosion, tropical storms, and rising sea levels, all common phenomena in the hurricane-prone Gulf of Mexico, making the idea of a naturally disappearing island seem plausible. Another theory suggested simple cartographic error. Before the invention of precise marine chronometers, navigational mistakes in determining longitude were common, and it's entirely possible that early sailors misidentified a large patch of floating sargassum, a sandbank, or even a mirage on the horizon, leading to the perpetuation of a mistake across centuries of maps and documents. Yet soon, darker interpretations began to emerge. Some politicians and analysts proposed that Bermeja had been deliberately destroyed, suggesting that parties with vested interests in the Gulf's oil wealth might have carried out a covert operation to eliminate the island physically, thus redrawing maritime borders to their advantage. The idea of demolishing an island to manipulate international boundaries sounded like science fiction, but in the high-stakes world of territorial and resource disputes, it was not entirely dismissed. There is no solid evidence supporting this accusation, but the simple fact that Bermeja vanished precisely when its existence would have greatly benefited Mexico economically was enough to keep the flames of suspicion alive in the public imagination. Other researchers offered an intermediate theory, that Bermeja was never truly a solid island, but rather a fragile coral platform, high enough centuries ago to emerge during certain tides or seasons, only to disappear gradually under the relentless forces of oceanic change. The mystery of Bermeja even impacted political negotiations. Without being able to prove the island's existence, Mexico lost leverage in defining maritime boundaries, and with it, the potential access to significant petroleum deposits. An invisible island that, despite no longer being there, had a very real influence on modern geopolitics. In Mexican popular culture, Bermeja has come to symbolize unexplained disappearances, a recurring theme in songs, literature, and public discourse, often compared to the mythical island of San Borondon in the Atlantic, said to appear and vanish like a spectral mirage. Yet, unlike medieval legends, Bermeja was recorded in official naval maps and seafarers' logs by experienced mariners. In recent years, proposals have been made to search for possible underwater remains using deep penetration radar or advanced seismographic methods. However, logistical difficulties, high costs, and a waning political interest following the finalization of maritime borders have all but halted these initiatives. Today, Bermeja survives only as a name etched in ancient documents and as a stark reminder of the fragility of human geography. A piece of land once thought secure, fixed, dependable, revealed instead to be as ephemeral as promises scribbled on fragile paper. Thus, caught between natural phenomena, human error, and geopolitical suspicion, the case of Bermeja Island remains unresolved. The disappearance of a piece of land is not something that happens every day, but in the Gulf of Mexico, that is exactly what occurred. And to this day, no one can say with complete certainty why. The SS Ourang Medan, the ship where everyone died in terror. Sometime around 1947, amidst the restless waters of the Strait of Malacca, a series of distress signals was intercepted, messages so chilling that they immediately froze the blood of every operator and sailor who heard them. The transmission came from a vessel known as the SS Ourang Medan, and what it conveyed was so terrifying that it quickly caught the attention of nearby ships and coastal stations alike. The first words were garbled, almost incomprehensible. All crew dead, followed by static and then finally a last haunting message. I die. After that, only absolute oppressive silence. The American merchant ship Silver Star responded without hesitation to the call for help. Following the coordinates transmitted before the communication was cut off, the crew eventually located the Ourang Medan, floating adrift on calm waters, apparently undamaged, showing no signs of collision, fire, or visible distress. It simply floated there, eerily abandoned to the ocean's will. But what they would find upon boarding was infinitely worse than they could have imagined. As the rescuers climbed aboard the Ourang Medan, an unnatural coldness enveloped them, chilling their bones in a part of the world where the heat is usually suffocating, and then they saw the bodies. The entire crew lay dead, strewn across the decks and scattered inside the ship's compartments, their faces frozen in expressions of pure, unfiltered terror, their eyes wide open, their mouths contorted into eternal, silent screams. Some of the corpses were twisted into unnatural positions, as if they had fought off some invisible force before succumbing to death. And yet, no wounds, no blood, no signs of physical violence or struggle were visible. Even the ship's dog was found dead, bearing the same horrified expression. Inside the radio room, the operator's corpse still clutched the transmitter, as if trying to send one final message before death took him. They attempted to investigate the cargo and the inner parts of the ship, desperate for any clue as to what had happened, but the situation deteriorated rapidly. A strong smell of chemicals permeated the air in certain areas of the vessel, and shortly after the boarding, smoke began to rise from deep within the ship's bowels, forcing the rescuers to evacuate immediately. Mere minutes after abandoning the Ourang Medan, the ship exploded violently, sinking quickly beneath the waves, taking with it any tangible evidence that might have explained the horror they had witnessed. The story of the Ourang Medan soon became one of the most disturbing maritime mysteries of the 20th century, a tale that puzzled experts and conspiracy theorists alike. The sudden death of the entire crew without any visible cause, the immediate explosion that obliterated the vessel, and the lack of substantial records only fueled a firestorm of hypotheses. One of the most plausible theories suggests that the ship was secretly transporting hazardous chemicals. Some versions point to potassium nitrate and potassium cyanide, highly toxic and volatile compounds, possibly destined for secret experiments or illegal weapons programs. According to this theory, a failure in storage conditions, perhaps due to temperature, humidity, or rough seas, might have triggered a release of toxic gases, leading to mass asphyxiation within minutes, explaining both the absence of physical injuries and the horrified expressions frozen on the sailors' faces, as death by toxic gas can cause violent spasms and convulsions. Another theory posits that the Ourang Medan was carrying prohibited chemical weapons left over from World War II. At the war's end, it is known that many clandestine shipments of dangerous materials were moved across the seas, far from the eyes of official authorities, and if the Ourang Medan had been one such vessel, there would have been immense pressure to erase its existence quietly after its catastrophic end. There are also more unusual explanations. Some suggest that natural phenomena, such as the sudden release of methane gas from the ocean floor, a known though rare event in the region, could have displaced the oxygen around the ship, causing immediate suffocation without warning. However, while this might account for the deaths, it does little to explain the panic-stricken faces or the violent explosion that followed. And, of course, there are the more extravagant theories, those who whisper of ghost ships, attacks by unknown entities, or electromagnetic phenomena so extreme that they altered the minds and bodies of the crew before death. Although captivating, these ideas lack substantial evidence and are generally dismissed by serious investigators. Perhaps the most perplexing mystery of all lies in the very identity of the SS Ourang Medan itself. No complete official records of the ship exist in international maritime databases from the era. No definitive proof of its registration, its ownership, or even its departure port has ever been confirmed. Some reports vaguely tie it to a Chinese or Sumatran harbor, but none have produced verifiable documentation. Even the ship's name may be a cryptic clue. In Malay, Ourang means man, and Medan refers to a city on the Indonesian island of Sumatra. Thus, the man from Medan. A strange and possibly symbolic moniker that only deepens the enigma. The lack of official information has led some to theorize that the Ourang Medan was a literal ghost ship, unregistered, operating in the shadows for clandestine purposes, and whose loss would be quietly ignored to avoid diplomatic scandals. Over time, the case of the Ourang Medan has been woven into countless books, television specials, and documentaries, each adding their own embellishments and speculations, but the basic facts, the desperate SOS, the scene of mass death, the explosion, the sinking, remain unchanged, painting a portrait of one of the most chilling maritime mysteries of the modern era. What truly happened aboard the SS Ourang Medan may never be known. With no survivors, no official investigations of substance, and no physical remains to study, the tragedy has drifted into the realm of legend, a ghost story on the sea. The authorities of the time quickly closed the case, and no subsequent attempt to uncover the truth has ever succeeded in shedding light on the events that took place that fateful day. All that remains are the fragments of those final, desperate radio transmissions, tales of terror passed down through generations, and a silent, invisible void somewhere out in the restless waters of the Strait of Malacca. The Bermuda Triangle, the sea where everything disappears. Throughout the 20th century, sailors, pilots, and adventurers began speaking of a region in the Atlantic where things simply vanished. Planes flying in perfect formation would disappear from radar without a trace. Entire ships, some massive, would leave port and never be seen again, swallowed without warning by an invisible force. This place became known as the Bermuda Triangle, a name that, even today, evokes a mixture of respect, fear, and endless fascination. The area, roughly outlined between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, forms an imaginary triangle covering more than 1 million square kilometers. Although to the naked eye it appears like any other part of the ocean, with deep blue waters and seemingly peaceful skies, it hides beneath its surface one of the highest concentrations of unexplained disappearances in the world. One of the cases that cemented its infamous reputation was the disappearance of Flight 19 in 1945. 5 U.S. Navy bombers, on a routine training mission, vanished simultaneously while flying over the triangle. What disturbed investigators even more was the final transmission from one of the pilots, who said, "We don't know where we are. Everything looks strange. We can't tell which way is the ocean. It looks strange." Shortly after, all communications ceased. The squadron was never found, despite one of the largest search operations ever conducted. And to make matters worse, the rescue planes sent after them also disappeared without a trace. Similar cases began to pile up. The USS Cyclops, a massive U.S. Navy cargo ship carrying over 300 people, vanished in 1918 without so much as a distress call. Later, 2 of its sister ships also disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. The British airliners Star Tiger and Star Ariel both vanished in separate flights in 1948 and 1949 respectively, again without storm warnings, emergency communications, or debris. The consistency of these incidents led many to wonder what made the Bermuda Triangle so unique. Starting in the 1960s, a myriad of theories emerged to explain the phenomena. One of the more scientifically accepted hypotheses points to the particular meteorological conditions of the region. The Bermuda Triangle lies in an area where sudden, violent storms can form in minutes, catching ships and planes by surprise under what had moments before been clear skies. These abrupt changes in air pressure and strong, unpredictable winds could disorient even experienced pilots and seasoned sailors. Additionally, the region hosts powerful ocean currents, notably the Gulf Stream, which flows rapidly from the Gulf of Mexico into the North Atlantic. This current is capable of swiftly carrying debris over long distances, which could explain why so often no wreckage is ever recovered after accidents. Another geological theory suggests the presence of massive methane hydrate deposits beneath the ocean floor. Under certain conditions, these gas pockets could erupt, releasing vast quantities of methane that decrease the water's density, making it incapable of supporting the weight of a ship, causing it to sink suddenly and silently, without giving the crew any time to issue a distress signal. Laboratory experiments have confirmed that this effect is real, although it has yet to be directly linked to specific Bermuda Triangle incidents. When it comes to aircraft, some researchers have proposed that magnetic anomalies in the area could interfere with navigational instruments. Reports exist of compasses spinning uncontrollably, of sudden and unexplained altitude losses and erratic readings. Yet, modern studies suggest that magnetic variation in the triangle is not significantly greater than in other parts of the world. Despite these rational explanations, more extraordinary theories have also gained popularity. Some writers have proposed that the Bermuda Triangle harbors dimensional portals, secret military experiments, or even submerged extraterrestrial bases, ideas that, although captivating to the imagination and pop culture, lack verifiable evidence. In the mid-20th century, the Bermuda Triangle became a true media phenomenon thanks to books like The Bermuda Triangle by Charles Berlitz. Berlitz's narratives, mixing real cases with speculation, catapulted the triangle into popular consciousness, cementing its association with mystery and the unexplained. From then on, every new disappearance fueled the legend, even if the causes were entirely rational and mundane. In reality, many modern researchers argue that the number of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle is not statistically higher than in other heavily trafficked maritime areas. Naturally, regions with intense commercial and aviation traffic will see more accidents than sparsely traveled ones. Furthermore, many incidents long attributed to the Bermuda Triangle have later been explained by human error, mechanical failure, or severe weather. Nonetheless, some cases continue to defy logical analysis. Accounts persist of sailors encountering dense, inexplicable mists, seeing strange lights beneath the waves, or feeling an overwhelming sense of disorientation. And while modern science dismisses supernatural properties in the region, the aura of mystery remains deeply rooted. One particularly striking feature of these disappearances is that, often, no clear distress signals are ever sent. In normal circumstances, a ship or plane in trouble would have time to radio for help, yet in many Bermuda Triangle cases, all communication ceases abruptly, reinforcing the perception that something beyond the ordinary may be at work. Beyond theories and statistics, the fame of the Bermuda Triangle refuses to fade. It continues to serve as a setting for films, television series, documentaries, and even video games, its image firmly etched into popular culture as the last great maritime enigma of our time. Today, thousands of vessels and flights traverse the triangle without incident. Commercial routes remain open, cruise ships sail joyfully, and airlines operate as they would over any other airspace. Yet none of that has erased the fascination. Every time a ship vanishes or a plane fails to arrive at its destination near that part of the world, the legend of the Bermuda Triangle stirs once more in the collective imagination. Perhaps the ultimate explanation is simpler than we think. A mixture of unpredictable nature, human error, and extreme environmental conditions. Or perhaps, the Bermuda Triangle still harbors secrets we have yet to uncover. For now, it remains one of the most famous and feared places on the sea. The submerged city of Dwarka, the Atlantis of India. Off the western coast of India, where the Arabian Sea caresses the beaches of Gujarat, lies one of the subcontinent's oldest and most revered regions, Dwarka. According to Hindu legends, it was here that the city built and ruled by none other than the god Krishna once stood. A magnificent metropolis, adorned with golden palaces, wide avenues, and flourishing gardens. It was said to shine so brightly that it could be seen from afar, a beacon of civilization in the ancient world. For centuries, Dwarka was considered pure mythology, a tale woven into the fabric of oral tradition, passed down through generations, a story meant more for temples and poetry than for history books. Until, towards the end of the 20th century, everything changed. In 1983, a team of archaeologists led by Dr. S. R. Rao, one of India's most respected researchers, began underwater explorations off the coast of Gujarat. Using sonar equipment and specialized divers, They detected rectilinear structures submerged about 20 meters beneath the waves, structures that were clearly not natural formations. Walls, streets, foundations, drainage systems, and orderly construction patterns emerged from the marine sands, all pointing to the existence of an ancient city beneath the ocean surface. The surprises did not end there. The site's dimensions were astounding, sprawling across several square kilometers, with stones of colossal size, some of them carved with geometric precision that defied the erosion of time. Columns, blocks, platforms, everything arranged according to a clear urban plan. The submerged city lying off the shores of Dwarka matched almost too perfectly the descriptions found in ancient Hindu texts such as the Mahabharata and the Haravamsa, which tell how Krishna founded a city to protect his people by relocating them from Mathura to a safer place by the sea. A marvel of engineering with crystal gates, rectilinear streets, and 7 fortified sectors. And according to legend, after Krishna's death, the city was swallowed by the ocean. Until then, scholars had largely believed that these accounts were purely symbolic, allegories woven to embellish religious lore. But now, the archaeological discoveries suggested a different possibility. That Dwarka might have truly existed, and that, just as the texts described, it had been devoured by the sea. Artifacts retrieved from the site were dated between 3,000 and 4,000 years old. Ceramic vessels, stone anchors, copper tools, many associated with the period around 1500 BCE, although some analyses suggest even earlier origins. These findings challenged the traditional understanding of Indian history, which placed the development of advanced urbanism much later in time. Yet the discovery also raised uncomfortable questions. Why would such a sophisticated city vanish? What forces could have dragged it beneath the ocean? Was it a natural catastrophe, such as a powerful earthquake or a sudden rise in sea levels, or something else entirely? The Gujarat region is known for its seismic activity. A massive earthquake could have caused the coastal city to collapse, followed by rapid encroachment by the sea. Alternatively, global climate changes following the last ice age, which caused dramatic sea level rises worldwide, might have submerged coastal settlements like Dwarka, leaving them hidden beneath the waves for millennia. Another possibility is that Dwarka was not a city built all at once, but rather a series of settlements layered over thousands of years, some of which succumbed to the ocean at different points in time. The remains found underwater could correspond to different phases of occupation, complicating efforts to pinpoint their exact age and historical context. Among the most impressive discoveries are the organized ports with carefully designed entry and exit channels, suggesting that the ancient inhabitants of Dwarka were not merely skilled builders but also adept seafarers, a notion that challenges the long-held belief that ancient civilizations of the Indian subcontinent were primarily agricultural and isolated. The hypothesis that Dwarka may have been a prosperous maritime center, trading goods and culture with other coastal peoples, has prompted a profound reevaluation of the early history of civilization in the Indian Ocean basin. Despite the magnitude of these discoveries, international recognition has remained limited. Part of the problem lies in the lack of systematic archaeological documentation and the ongoing controversy regarding the precise age of the structures. Some foreign researchers remain skeptical, arguing that the submerged formations could be natural features and that the artifacts found might not necessarily belong to the supposed ancient city. Nonetheless, the Indian government has declared the area a site of great cultural and archaeological importance, and projects have been launched to protect and further study the submerged ruins. Divers who explore the site often describe an eerie experience, walking among sunken remnants, tracing lines of carved stone with their hands, touching the foundations of buildings that once bustled with life, all while suspended in the silent pressure of the ocean, surrounded by schools of fish and unseen currents. Beyond academic debates, for millions of people in India, the discovery of Dwarka holds deep spiritual meaning. Many believe it confirms that the stories of Krishna are rooted in historical fact rather than mere mythology. For them, every carved stone, every submerged street is a tangible echo of a glorious past. Interest in Dwarka has not waned. Ambitious new expeditions have been proposed, equipped with three-dimensional scanning technologies and robotic submarines capable of mapping the underwater structures in high definition. The hope is to digitally reconstruct the lost city, to better understand its urban design, and perhaps to confirm once and for all whether it truly corresponds to the mythical settlement described thousands of years ago. But the ocean does not yield its secrets easily. Marine currents shift the sands, structures deteriorate, and the remnants of entire civilizations crumble slowly under the relentless pressure of saltwater. Every passing year erases a little more of what once stood proudly above the waves. Dwarka, the sunken city, remains one of the greatest archaeological enigmas of the Indian Ocean, an ancient story that stubbornly refuses to be forgotten. A civilization that may have been very real, whose vestiges now sleep beneath the sea. And although research continues, for now, the carved stones submerged under the waves are all we have to keep imagining what that legendary city of the gods might once have been. The curse of the Titanic shipwreck are echoes of tragedies without explanation. On the night of April 14th to 15th, 1912, the world witnessed an unprecedented tragedy. The Titanic, the largest and most luxurious ship of its time, collided with an iceberg during its maiden voyage and sank into the frigid waters of the North Atlantic, taking with it more than 1,500 lives. The disaster became one of the most studied and documented events in modern history. Yet, beyond the technical reports and official investigations, the Titanic has always been surrounded by an aura of curse and inexplicable events that continue to fuel debate more than a century later. From its very conception, the Titanic was enveloped in an atmosphere of almost supernatural arrogance. It was called the unsinkable ship, a bold claim that seemed to challenge the forces of nature themselves. The pride with which its invincibility was proclaimed was interpreted by some as a provocation of fate. When the ship finally sank, that label became not just tragically ironic, but also a powerful catalyst for the idea that the Titanic was marked by forces beyond human comprehension. One of the most curious stories that surfaced after the disaster was the existence of a novel titled Futility, written in 1898 by Morgan Robertson, 14 years before the sinking. The novel describes the demise of a massive luxury liner called Titan, which crashes into an iceberg in the North Atlantic on its maiden voyage. The similarities between the fictional Titan and the real Titanic are so numerous and eerie that they have sparked theories of predestination and prophetic visions. Was it simply an extraordinary coincidence, or an ignored omen? Another unsettling aspect involves the series of misfortunes associated with objects recovered from the wreck. Many people who acquired or exhibited artifacts salvaged from the Titanic reported strange events. Inexplicable accidents, sudden health declines, financial ruin, and even untimely deaths. Some museums claim that objects retrieved from the ocean floor, ranging from porcelain plates to jewelry, seem to carry a heavy energy that affects those who handle them. Such reports have led to extreme caution in the handling of Titanic artifacts, sometimes even involving symbolic rituals meant to neutralize any lingering effects. Yet the notion of a Titanic curse is not confined to post-tragedy superstitions. Many survivors of the disaster reported strange sensations and premonitions before the collision. Some passengers claimed to have had vivid dreams of death at sea in the days leading up to the voyage. Others canceled their tickets at the last moment due to inexplicable feelings of unease. There is also the record of a crewman, David Blair, who was reassigned from the Titanic days before the voyage and, in his haste to leave the ship, accidentally took with him a key to a locker containing the lookout's binoculars. Without the binoculars, the lookouts had reduced visibility on the fateful night of April 14th, which may have contributed to the iceberg not being spotted in time. The coincidence of the missing key is another of those small, unsettling details that fuel the idea that the Titanic was doomed from the start. Over the years, the physical conditions surrounding the sinking have also been scrutinized. Scientists have pointed out that the night the Titanic went down was unusually clear yet dark, with a meteorological phenomenon known as a cold water mirage. This optical illusion can distort the appearance of objects on the horizon, making an iceberg appear smaller or farther away than it truly is. This rare weather phenomenon was documented in the region during that very month, once again suggesting that nature conspired in a chain of events so precise it becomes difficult to ignore the feeling of fatality. The recovery of the Titanic's remains in 1985, lying more than 3,800 meters deep, only added further questions. The images revealed a haunting desolation. The ship torn in two, draped in rust, resting in absolute silence. Yet even among the explorers who descended to the site, strange incidents were reported. Unexplained electrical failures in submersibles, disrupted communications, and an almost unanimous sensation of being watched. Some explorers also described auditory hallucinations underwater, as if distant voices traveled through the currents. While extreme pressure and exhaustion might explain such phenomena, not all researchers have been convinced that these experiences were merely psychological. The Titanic also left a chilling legacy among its survivors. Many suffered from severe post-traumatic stress, and more than a few claimed that the ship, or the trauma they endured aboard it, haunted them for the rest of their lives. Some of the most notable survivors, such as Mrs. Madeline Astor and Bruce Ismay, lived in seclusion following the tragedy, consumed by guilt and relentless memories. Another curious detail is that several ships later bearing the name Titanic, or referencing the disaster in their branding, suffered accidents, fires, or commercial failure. It is as if the very name became burdened with a negative energy that many prefer to avoid even to this day. Over the years, multiple expeditions have been launched to recover remains and explore the Titanic, but ethical debates have also risen about whether the site should be left in peace. Many believe that the Titanic should not be treated as an archaeological attraction, but as a maritime graveyard, a sacred resting place for the over 1,500 souls who perished during one of the coldest and most tragic nights in history. Today, the deterioration of the wreck is accelerating. Specialized bacteria are feeding on the steel, and it is expected that within a few decades, the remains will collapse entirely. When that happens, all that will remain of the Titanic will be the memories and the stories the world has woven around its legend. The story of the Titanic is not merely the tale of a ship that sank. It is the story of how a symbol of human arrogance, blind faith in technology, and the desire to dominate nature came face to face with the unforgiving reality of the ocean. And for some, the strange details surrounding its construction, sinking, and enduring legacy are more than mere coincidences. They are signs that the Titanic, somehow, was never meant to complete its journey. The creature of Lake Labynkyr, the frozen monster of Siberia. In one of the most inhospitable and frozen places on Earth, amid the desolate landscape of Yakutia in northeastern Siberia, there lies a lake that holds a mystery as chilling as its waters. Lake Labynkyr. At first glance, the lake seems like just another body of water in the vast Siberian wilderness, but for generations, the inhabitants of the region have told stories of a gigantic creature lurking in its depths. A presence that many believe still lives to this day. The local legends stretch back centuries. Yakut nomads avoided venturing too close to Labynkyr, recounting tales of boats shattered by something enormous, of animals vanishing near the shoreline, of eerie screams rising from beneath the ice during the endless winter nights. For them, the lake was not simply a cold and desolate place. It was a forbidden zone, marked by forces that did not belong to the human world. In the mid-20th century, Labynkyr stopped being just a part of folklore. In 1953, a scientific expedition led by geologist Viktor Tverdoklebov arrived at Labynkyr with the aim of studying its geological formation and characteristics. The team expected to gather data on the region's tectonics, but instead, they recorded one of the most chilling testimonies ever documented in an official Soviet report. According to Tverdoklebov's account, while conducting observations from a small boat, several members of the expedition spotted something enormous moving beneath the surface. It was not a fleeting shadow nor an optical illusion caused by the ice. It was a defined, long, dark shape moving against the current. The geologist wrote in his report, "I saw a huge creature moving slowly underwater. The visible part was about 5 meters long, but I could not discern the full body." From that moment on, interest in Lake Labynkyr soared among scientists and adventurers alike. Some sought to investigate more deeply, but the extreme conditions of the place made it nearly impossible. During winter, temperatures can plunge below -60 degrees Celsius, and even in summer, access remains treacherous due to the swampy terrain and the absence of stable routes. Moreover, the lake itself has unusual characteristics. Labynkyr is much deeper than its size would suggest, reaching depths of over 80 meters in certain areas. Curiously, despite the extreme cold, the lake never freezes entirely, suggesting the presence of geothermal springs at its bottom that maintain the water relatively warm beneath the surface ice. These conditions create an atypical ecosystem, one where organisms unknown elsewhere might survive. One of the most discussed hypotheses is that the lake could be connected underground to neighboring lakes, such as Lake Verota, through cracks and tunnels formed by tectonic activity. If this were true, a large creature could move between lakes undetected, hidden beneath the frozen Siberian landscape. In 2012, a team from Yakutsk State University organized a modern expedition to Labynkyr. Armed with sonar and diving equipment adapted to extreme conditions, they sought to map the lake floor and search for anomalies. During their exploration, the instruments recorded massive objects moving at depths where no known life forms of such size should exist. Though the scientists were cautious in their statements, they admitted the sonar echoes did not match rock formations or typical schools of fish. One diver who descended into the icy depths described the experience as swimming above a dark abyss, where anything could be watching you. He reported seeing vague, undefined shapes moving in the gloom, shapes far too large to be explained by any known regional fauna. Theories about what this creature could be range from an unknown species of giant fish, such as a surviving prehistoric sturgeon, to a reptile thought to have gone extinct millions of years ago. Some have even speculated that it could be a plesiosaur, a marine reptile believed to have vanished along with the dinosaurs. Although there is no solid paleontological evidence to support such claims, the idea continues to captivate those who dream that Lake Labynkyr might be hiding a living fossil beneath its surface. Other researchers propose more conventional explanations, that the sightings could be the result of optical illusions or misidentifications of large schools of fish moving together. Temperature variations in the water, combined with the peculiarities of polar light, could distort perceptions of size and distance underwater. Despite rational explanations, fear persists among the locals. There are relatively recent reports from fishermen who claim to have seen enormous waves rising from the lake's surface without any boat in sight. Others tell of their fishing nets being torn apart, as if wrenched suddenly and violently from below. Beyond the creature legends, Lake Labynkyr has also been the scene of other strange phenomena. Sightings of unidentified lights on the darkest nights, abrupt and extreme changes in weather within minutes, and low-frequency underwater sounds captured by hydrophones that do not match any known species. The combination of all these elements has turned the lake into a key reference point for those who study cryptozoology and unexplained phenomena. Yet its remoteness and the harsh challenges of long-term investigation have left many questions unanswered. To this day, there is no conclusive physical evidence of a giant creature living in Labynkyr. No remains have been recovered, no clear photographs captured, but neither have the numerous testimonies, sonar readings, and reports accumulated over decades been definitively debunked. And in a region as vast and remote as Siberia, where more secrets lie hidden beneath the ice than we can possibly imagine, Lake Labynkyr remains one of those rare places where science and mystery coexist without needing to be reconciled. The creature of the lake might be real, a myth, or a mixture of both. For now, the only certainty is that beneath the frozen waters of Labynkyr, something lies that we still do not fully understand. The Joyita, the empty ship, and the mystery of its final voyage. The vast Pacific Ocean, immense and filled with secrets, has been the stage for countless maritime disappearances. But among all of them, there is one story that stands out for its sheer strangeness, that of the Joyita. A ship found adrift, damaged but still floating, abandoned hastily with no trace of its crew, leaving behind far more questions than answers. The Joyita was a luxury yacht built in 1931, later converted into a transport and fishing vessel. Although already a veteran ship by 1955, it was still considered reliable. Its final voyage began on October 3rd of that year, when it departed from Samoa bound for Tokelau, a short trip of about 270 nautical miles. On board were 25 people, including crew and passengers, along with a cargo consisting of food, medical supplies, and bags of copra. From the moment it set sail, no radio communication was received. No distress signal was ever sent. The next time the Joyita was heard of was more than a month later. On November 10th, a reconnaissance plane spotted the vessel adrift, partially submerged, over 600 kilometers off its intended route. When the rescue team boarded the Joyita, they encountered a deeply unsettling scene. There was no one aboard. All 25 occupants had vanished without a trace. The ship showed signs of damage. The hull had been battered, and the deck was partially flooded. Yet, the vessel was constructed from balsa wood, making it practically unsinkable. Despite the water ingress, it remained firmly afloat, making the decision to abandon it even more inexplicable. Several disturbing details emerged. The wall clock had stopped at 10:25, the navigation lights were still on even though the generator was dead, and the radio had been tuned to an emergency frequency, but one different from the usual setting. Life jackets were missing, as were the lifeboats. Most of the cargo had also vanished. Subsequent technical inspections revealed that a pipe from the engine's cooling system had failed, causing a partial flooding. Yet again, there was no reason to abandon the ship. The Joyita was built to stay afloat even under severe damage. The pressing question was obvious. What had driven the entire crew and all passengers to abandon a vessel that could still have saved their lives? Speculations quickly arose. One of the first theories suggested that Captain Miller, a veteran of the Merchant Navy, may have suffered a health crisis, leaving the crew without leadership. Some reports indicated that Miller had been in poor health before the voyage, affected by unspecified ailments. Without an experienced captain, panic among the passengers might have triggered an impulsive decision to evacuate. Another theory pointed towards modern piracy. It was suggested that the Joyita may have been attacked by pirates seeking its cargo. The disappearance of goods seemed to support this idea. However, there were no signs of struggle aboard, no blood, no signs of violent confrontation inside the vessel. Some investigators proposed the possibility of a mutiny or a conflict between crew and passengers. Under the pressure of a mechanical failure, fear, and poor communication, a chaotic situation could have arisen, leading to a collective decision to abandon ship. A more technical hypothesis suggests that the crew might have believed the ship was sinking faster than it actually was. Water flooding the engine room and a failing engine might have caused a dangerous list. In a state of panic and without fully trusting the vessel's buoyancy, they may have decided to abandon it, hoping to reach land. But in the vast Pacific, without reliable navigation equipment or clear communication, that decision would have been a death sentence. Evidence was also found that the medical supplies aboard had been used, suggesting that there may have been injuries or illnesses during the disaster. Yet, without bodies, survivors, or testimonies, it is impossible to know exactly what transpired. The mystery of the Joyita does not end with its disappearance. The official investigation revealed that the ship's radio system had a severely limited range due to a broken antenna, explaining why no clear distress signal was ever received. But further irregularities emerged regarding the ship's maintenance before departure. Inspection records were inadequate, the engine had pre-existing issues, and the life-saving equipment was incomplete. The combination of technical failures, possible negligence, and desperate decisions seems the most plausible explanation. Yet many loose ends remain. Why abandon a floating ship? What happened to the bodies? Why was no flare launched? No more evident trace left behind. Over the years, the story of the Joyita has often been compared to that of the Mary Celeste, another ship found eerily empty without clear explanations. In both cases, the very nature of the sea, immense, unpredictable, silent, played a crucial role in magnifying the mystery. To this day, not a single trace of the 25 missing people has been found. No bodies, no lifeboats, no floating debris. Only the ship itself, discovered like an empty shell, drifting toward nowhere. The Joyita was eventually towed back to Samoa, partially repaired, and used for a few more years, but its reputation as a cursed ship followed it until the end. No later voyage could erase the shadow left by that episode of inexplicable abandonment. As so often happens, the ocean kept its answers hidden beneath the surface. And in modern maritime history, the name Joyita remains as one of those rare cases where the complete absence of evidence becomes, in itself, the proof of an unsolvable mystery. The Sargasso Sea, the shoreless ocean that traps ships. In the heart of the North Atlantic, in a region where no islands or landmasses exist, lies a sea unlike any other on Earth, the Sargasso Sea. Its name comes from the enormous masses of floating algae, known as sargassum, forming dense golden mats that stretch across thousands of square kilometers. It is the only sea in the world without land borders, defined solely by the ocean currents that encircle it. But beyond its unique geography, the Sargasso Sea harbors a chilling reputation. Since the first European voyages of exploration, sailors spoke of the Sargasso as a place that seemed to defy the known laws of the ocean. Christopher Columbus's records describe how, during his first voyage in 1492, his caravels encountered vast stretches of algae that seemed to slow their ships, trapping them in a motionless sea. Columbus and his men grew fearful that they would be unable to escape, imprisoned in an endless vegetal maze. Although the Sargasso Sea is not a swamp of solid algae, its combination of light winds, circular currents, and vast carpets of sargassum could render sailing ships virtually adrift, unable to progress without external assistance. In the age of sail, becoming trapped in the Sargasso could mean the difference between life and death. With no wind, no strong currents, and algae stretching endlessly in all directions, some ships were stalled for weeks, their crews slowly depleting their supplies of food and water under a punishing sun. Accounts of shipwrecks and disappearances in this region abound in logbooks from the 17th and 18th centuries. Some ships were found years later, empty, their sails rotted, and their decks covered in algae. Others were never seen again. These stories fueled the legend of the Sargasso Sea as a floating graveyard, a place where ships went to die slowly, trapped by unseen forces. The Sargasso Sea has also been associated with even stranger phenomena. Some ancient mariners claim to have seen thick mists rising from nowhere, shrouding their ships for days on end. Others spoke of blue lights flickering over the water on moonless nights, drifting inexplicably through the algae mats. There are even reports of distant voices heard through the fog, in places where no other ships were visible. In the 20th century, with scientific advancement, some of these phenomena were given plausible explanations. It was discovered that the high concentration of decomposing organic matter can produce bioluminescence, creating flashes of greenish-blue light at night. It is also known that the dense mats of algae can alter surface water temperatures, producing localized microclimates that could explain sudden mists. But not everything has such a neat answer. One of the most debated mysteries is the so-called dead zones within the Sargasso Sea. In certain areas, the levels of dissolved oxygen are unusually low, creating nearly stagnant waters where marine life is scarce. These zones, combined with the absence of wind, form patches where natural movement almost ceases altogether. For the ancient mariners, venturing into these areas felt like sailing into a realm suspended outside of time itself. The Sargasso Sea has also been the subject of countless speculative theories. Some science fiction writers imagined it as a natural portal to other dimensions, inspired by its eerie calm and historical disappearances. Others envisioned giant sea creatures lurking beneath the algae, invisible from the surface but capable of dragging entire ships into the depths. Though these ideas are fantastic, the truth is that the Sargasso is a unique ecosystem. It serves as an important breeding ground for European and American eels, which cross the entire Atlantic to spawn in these waters. It is also home to peculiar fauna adapted to live among the floating sargassum. Camouflaged fish, young turtles, tiny crustaceans. Life here does not follow the usual rules of the open ocean. Oceanographically, the Sargasso Sea is maintained in place by a system of rotating currents known as the North Atlantic Gyre. This current forms a kind of ring, enclosing the sea within and creating a space where the water accumulates and moves very slowly. Yet, this same natural isolation has also turned it into a marine dumping ground, as large amounts of plastic and debris become trapped along with the sargassum, worsening ecological problems in recent years. Despite its biological importance, the Sargasso Sea remains largely unexplored. Its unpredictable conditions, navigational difficulties, and the absence of clear landmarks make many expeditions avoid it altogether. Even today, ships often prefer to sail around it rather than through it. The more recent legends of the Sargasso Sea no longer focus so much on sea monsters or portals to other worlds, but rather on ghost ships. There are reports of modern vessels, fishing boats, private yachts, found adrift within the sea, abandoned without signs of struggle or shipwreck. The documented causes tend to be mechanical failures, navigational errors, or personal misfortunes, yet the eerie atmosphere of the Sargasso continues to feed the idea that it swallows those daring enough to challenge it. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this sea is the overwhelming sensation of emptiness. Unlike other seas teeming with life and movement, the Sargasso offers a desolate image. Calm waters, motionless skies, and a silence broken only by the soft brushing of algae against a ship's hull. For those who sail alone across this immense ocean of plants, there is no clear sense of direction or progress. Everything repeats, day after day, as if trapped in an endless loop. And although modern technology has greatly reduced the dangers of becoming trapped, the Sargasso Sea has not lost its mystery. It remains a place where time seems to suspend itself, where nature imposes its strange rhythm, and where the stories of vanished ships continue to drift alongside the golden algae, slowly carried by invisible currents. HMS Eurydice, the naval ghost that still sails. On March 24, 1878, HMS Eurydice, a Royal Navy training ship, was sailing toward Portsmouth after a long training tour in the Caribbean. It was a calm afternoon with clear skies and a gentle breeze, and on board over 350 men. Cadets, officers, and sailors were preparing to return home. The coast of the Isle of Wight was already visible on the horizon, and everything suggested the voyage would end without complications. But fate had other plans. In a matter of minutes, a sudden and violent meteorological phenomenon known as a squall descended upon the ship. A blast of hurricane-force winds, accompanied by a thick curtain of snow, enveloped the Eurydice, trapping her before she could maneuver. Before the crew could react, the wind heeled the ship over, flooding her with icy water in mere seconds. The Eurydice sank quickly, leaving only the tops of her masts briefly visible before she vanished beneath the waves. Of the more than 350 men aboard, only 2 survived. The tragedy shocked the nation. The Eurydice had been seen as a symbol of British naval pride, and her sudden loss, so close to home, struck an unexpected blow. Newspapers of the time extensively covered the story, and Queen Victoria herself sent messages of condolence to the families of the deceased. Yet the story of HMS Eurydice did not end with her sinking. Soon after the disaster, reports began to emerge of sightings of the ghost ship. Local sailors and fishermen claimed they had seen the silhouette of the Eurydice sailing off the Isle of Wight, fully rigged, her sails unfurled, silently gliding over the water, only to vanish before their eyes. One of the first reports came from a steamship crossing the area just weeks after the sinking. According to witnesses, they saw a tall ship approaching at high speed. Believing survivors from the Eurydice or a similar vessel might be in distress, they changed course to intercept it. But before they could reach it, the ship vanished like a shadow dissolving into thin air. Over time, the sightings became more frequent. Some captains swore they saw the ship's figure emerging from the mist, completely silent. Others described flickering lights in the place where the Eurydice had sunk. On several occasions, modern ships reported temporary failures in their compasses and navigation systems while approaching the area, only for everything to return to normal a few minutes later. The phenomenon was not confined to local rumors. In 1934, none other than the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VIII, publicly stated that he had seen the spectral Eurydice while sailing near the island. His testimony gave a new level of credibility to the legend, drawing international media attention. Over the years, paranormal researchers, writers, and the simply curious visited the area, hoping to capture evidence of the ghost ship. Some claimed to have photographed shapes vaguely resembling a tall ship in the mist. Others recorded sounds of creaking and knocking, like the groaning of a wooden hull rubbing against the waves, on nights when the sea was otherwise completely calm. Although conventional science attributes the sightings to atmospheric phenomena, such as mirages, thermal inversions, or optical illusions caused by light refraction, no one has been able to fully explain the persistence and consistency of the descriptions. Nearly all witnesses agree on the details. A square-rigged ship of classic construction, advancing silently before vanishing without a trace. The wreck of the Eurydice has also been linked to a nearby area known as the Needles, a group of sharp rock formations protruding from the sea near the Isle of Wight. This region is known for its sudden changes in currents, its fog banks, and its strange wind formations. Many ships have suffered incidents in these waters, feeding the reputation of the area as a place laden with strange energies. Beyond the paranormal, HMS Eurydice left a tangible legacy. Following her sinking, the Royal Navy implemented changes in its training protocols, revised safety measures for sudden storms, and adopted better meteorological forecasting methods. Although these improvements could not bring back the lives lost that day, they helped save future generations of sailors. In 1999, a group of marine archaeologists located the remains of the Eurydice under the waters off the Isle of Wight. Fragments of the hull, masts, and cannons were identified. However, the site is considered a war grave, and authorities have restricted access to protect its integrity and honor the memory of those who perished. The image of HMS Eurydice remains alive in British collective memory. There are monuments, poems, and songs commemorating her story. And, of course, the mystery persists. Is it possible that, on certain misty nights, the pride of the Royal Navy still sails for a fleeting moment, eternally reliving her final voyage? For the sailors who swear they have seen her white figure gliding in the distance, the HMS Eurydice never truly ceased to roam the seas. The SS Valencia, the voices of the shipwrecked that will not rest. The Pacific Northwest coastline is a merciless place. Its sheer cliffs, brutal waves, and rapidly changing weather have claimed countless lives since the first ships dared to navigate those waters. Yet among all the maritime tragedies to have occurred along that rugged shore, few have left as deep a mark as that of the SS Valencia. The Valencia was a passenger steamship built in 1882. It was not particularly luxurious or large, but it had served faithfully for decades, traveling routes between San Francisco and ports further north. By 1906, the Valencia was considered a veteran vessel, and some whispered that it was nearing the end of its useful life. Still, when it departed San Francisco on January 20, 1906, carrying 108 passengers and a crew of around 60 men, no one could have imagined the tragedy about to unfold. 2 days after setting sail, in the midst of a ferocious winter storm, the Valencia lost its bearings amid the darkness and fog. As weather conditions worsened and navigational instruments grew increasingly unreliable, the ship drifted dangerously close to the rocky shores of Vancouver Island, in British Columbia. Shortly after midnight on January 22nd, the Valencia struck a reef with catastrophic force. The impact shattered the cargo hold and began flooding the engine room. The crew desperately attempted to launch lifeboats, but the waves were so violent that many were instantly smashed against the sides of the ship or capsized, tossing their occupants into the freezing water. What followed was a scene of utter chaos. Women and children cried out, men tried and failed to improvise rafts, and giant waves dragged away those who dared to leap into the ocean. Some survivors managed to scramble onto elevated parts of the semi-submerged ship, clinging to hope as the wreck was battered relentlessly by sharp rocks and the unrelenting sea. For hours and even days, the broken remains of the Valencia remained visible from the shore. Locals and would-be rescuers could see the stranded ship from the cliffs, but the savage weather made any rescue attempts nearly impossible. Efforts to send rescue lines from land failed, leaving the few survivors helplessly stranded, slowly succumbing to the sea. Eventually, the relentless waves destroyed what was left of the Valencia. Of the roughly 170 people aboard, only 37 survived. The survivors' accounts spoke of terror, despair, and heartbreaking resignation. Most of the women and children drowned or were crushed by the wreckage. The bodies that the ocean did not claim washed ashore days later, scattered along miles of desolate coastline. The disaster caused a public outcry in both Canada and the United States. Criticism of the incompetence of the rescue operations led to the construction of the Cape Beale Lighthouse and improvements to navigation routes in the area. Yet beyond these practical changes, the sinking of the Valencia left something else behind, a lingering mystery that refuses to dissipate. Not long after the tragedy, reports of strange phenomena began to surface around the site of the wreck. One of the most persistent tales was that of the voices. Fishermen, sailors, and coastal residents began to claim that on stormy nights, cries and pleas for help could be heard coming from the sea below the cliffs. Sometimes, according to witnesses, the voices seemed to form entire choirs of despair. It didn't matter that there were no ships nearby. It didn't matter that the conditions were too brutal for anyone to survive at sea. Other accounts described the spectral appearance of a ship. On dense, foggy nights, several sailors reported seeing the blurred figure of a steamship, resembling the Valencia, stranded off the coast, only to watch it vanish moments later. Some captains even tried to approach, believing they were witnessing a real vessel in distress, but they found nothing but open, empty water. One of the most well-documented incidents occurred in 1910, when a crew reported sighting a partially submerged steamer from a distance. As they approached, they found only scattered wreckage from ancient shipwrecks, with no trace of any recently distressed vessel. Authorities concluded they must have seen floating debris, but the sailors swore the silhouette was that of a complete ship. The story of the Valencia includes even stranger episodes. Tales circulated about ghost rafts, small lifeboats found floating near the island years after the sinking, in surprisingly good condition despite supposedly being adrift for so long. On one occasion, one of the Valencia's original life rafts, identified by its serial number, was found calmly floating in open water, covered in moss but astonishingly intact, as if preserved in a suspended pocket of time. Modern researchers have tried to explain these phenomena. Some attribute the voices to the way sound travels over dense fog, which can create strange auditory illusions. Others believe that the sightings of phantom ships are simple maritime mirages, caused by differences in temperature between the ocean surface and the cold air above it. But many locals, especially those whose families have fished these waters for generations, remain convinced that the spirit of the Valencia has never left. To them, the ship and its doomed crew are trapped in an eternal loop of tragedy, replaying their final cries for help whenever storms howl across the cliffs. Today, few physical remnants of the Valencia remain. The ocean and time have reclaimed almost everything. Yet the legend endures. Even now, mariners passing near that stretch of Vancouver Island speak quietly of the nights when the wind seems to carry the faint echoes of distant screams. Echoes of a tragedy that, though more than a century old, still haunts the restless waters. Flight 19, the squadron lost in the Bermuda Triangle. On December 5, 1945, just months after the end of World War II, 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers of the United States Navy took off from the Naval Air Station at Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on what was supposed to be a routine training mission. It was a clear afternoon, with moderate winds and ideal conditions for a simple navigation exercise over the Atlantic Ocean. The squadron, known as Flight 19, was composed of experienced pilots and led by Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor. The mission seemed straightforward: a triangular navigation route that would take them eastward over the Atlantic, then north and finally back toward the base. However, only a few hours after takeoff, the entire squadron vanished without a trace. Flight 19 not only became one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history, but also a cornerstone in the enduring legend of the Bermuda Triangle. Everything began normally. Initial radio transmissions confirmed the planes were following their intended path. But around 3:40 p.m., something changed. Air traffic control at Fort Lauderdale picked up a disturbing transmission from Lieutenant Taylor. "We don't know where we are. We have lost direction." Subsequent communications grew even more confusing. Taylor and his men described landscapes that did not match their expected route. They reported that their compasses were malfunctioning and that they could not determine which way they were heading. One radio operator who listened in remarked that the pilots sounded disoriented, as if they no longer trusted their instruments or their senses. As the hours dragged on, the situation worsened. The Avenger's fuel supplies dwindled, and darkness fell quickly over the Atlantic. An immediate search and rescue operation was launched, with ships and planes dispatched across a vast swath of ocean. Roughly an hour after Flight 19's last communication, a Martin PBM Mariner rescue seaplane, carrying a crew of 13, took off to join the search, but it too vanished. Minutes after the Mariner's departure, a nearby ship reported witnessing an explosion in the sky and a column of smoke rising from the ocean. It was believed that the mariner had suffered a mid-air explosion, likely caused by a fuel leak, as those aircraft were notoriously prone to accidents. However, no wreckage was ever recovered, not from the mariner and not from Flight 19. The search and rescue effort spanned over a week, involving more than 300 aircraft and dozens of ships, scouring thousands of square miles of ocean. Nothing was found. No debris, no oil slicks, no life rafts, no sign whatsoever of the 27 missing men. The disappearance of Flight 19 and the mariner sent to rescue them shocked the nation. The U.S. Navy convened a board of inquiry, but their final report was vague and unsatisfying. They suggested that the pilots, disoriented and lacking reliable instruments, likely flew farther out to sea until they ran out of fuel and crashed. But the report could not definitively determine what had caused the disorientation to begin with. It concluded simply, "Causes unknown." Over the years, the story of Flight 19 acquired even stranger dimensions. Some researchers pointed to magnetic anomalies in the Bermuda Triangle that could have affected the aircraft's compasses. Others blamed human error, suggesting that Lieutenant Taylor, confused by changing weather conditions, believed he was flying over the Florida Keys when he was actually further north, leading him to steer the squadron even farther away from land. There were also darker theories. Some proposed that powerful ocean currents and sudden meteorological phenomena could have pulled the aircraft under so rapidly that no wreckage floated to the surface. Others speculated that the planes could have fallen into swift currents like the Gulf Stream, dispersing any remains in a matter of hours. In later decades, search expeditions attempted to locate the missing Avengers. Sunken aircraft were indeed discovered scattered across the Atlantic seabed, but none were definitively identified as belonging to Flight 19. Some of the wreckage found matched similar planes but from different, unrelated accidents. Another key factor raised by historians is Lieutenant Taylor's previous history of navigational disorientation. Records show he had gotten lost during flights over the Caribbean before. Furthermore, on the day of the mission, Taylor reportedly requested to be replaced, feeling unprepared for the assignment, a request that was denied. For some, his confusion was the critical catalyst for the unfolding disaster. Yet, even if human error played a role, the complete disappearance of 5 military aircraft and a rescue plane, without a single piece of confirmed debris, remains profoundly unsettling. In a vast ocean filled with powerful currents and unpredictable storms, the odds seem stacked against them, but the total lack of evidence still defies expectations. Flight 19's mystery has been immortalized in books, documentaries, and films. It has become one of the signature cases associated with the Bermuda Triangle, standing alongside tales like that of the Mary Celeste and other inexplicable maritime phenomena. Was it simply a tragic chain of human errors compounded by nature's merciless unpredictability? Or was there something more lurking within that enigmatic region of the Atlantic? Something we still do not fully understand? Modern science leans toward rational explanations, yet for many, Flight 19 represents the place where human logic dissolves into the vast, indifferent mystery of the sea. Today, in Navy flight schools and aviation navigation manuals, Flight 19 is studied as a deadly reminder of the critical importance of trusting instruments and maintaining composure in moments of confusion. But beyond the technical lessons, Flight 19 remains an enduring enigma, suspended in time, like faint echoes of lost voices still wandering over the Atlantic, forever searching for a way home. The cries of the Strait of Malacca, sounds of unknown origin. The Strait of Malacca, one of the world's busiest and most strategically important maritime passages, stretches between the Malay Peninsula and the island of Sumatra. Thousands of ships cross its waters every year, transporting oil, goods, and passengers between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. At first glance, the strait appears to be nothing more than a vital artery of global commerce. But for those who know it intimately, it is also a place filled with unsettling phenomena. For decades, sailors and fishermen have reported hearing piercing, anguished screams coming from the waters of the strait, especially during the darkest hours before dawn. Some describe them as human cries, others as long, mournful wails. What is strange is that most of the time, no one else is in sight. These stories are not recent. Historical accounts from European settlers in the 19th century already mention strange sounds in the region. Some sailors wrote of hearing voices calling for help in languages they could not identify, floating eerily over the surface of the water. Others spoke of whispers and sobbing that seemed to circle their ships, even when no other vessels were nearby. Over the years, these testimonies have been collected from various sources: captains of large merchant ships, crews of local fishing boats, even naval officers, and all agree on certain patterns. The sounds occur at night, mainly under conditions of fog or unusually calm seas. There are no signs of recent shipwrecks or accidents nearby. The cries seem to come directly from the water, not from the air or from distant ships. Trying to explain these phenomena has proven difficult. One of the earliest theories points to shipwrecks. The Strait of Malacca is infamous for its dangers. Over the centuries, countless vessels have been lost there. Victims of storms, navigational errors, piracy, or warfare. Some suggest that the cries could be acoustic echoes generated by the twisted remains of sunken ships, which under specific conditions of temperature and pressure, might produce sounds eerily similar to whales. Another possibility is marine bioacoustics, sounds produced by sea animals. Certain marine mammals, such as whales and dolphins, emit vocalizations that, when distorted by the water, can resemble human voices. However, the marine fauna of the Strait of Malacca is limited compared to other oceanic regions, and the sounds described are often reported as being too human to be easily attributed to animals. There is also the theory of anomalous sound propagation. Under specific conditions of temperature and salinity, water can act as a sound channel, transporting noises across vast distances and warping them along the way. It's possible that the cries are distant port sounds, engines, or even human conversations distorted and strangely amplified. Even so, many seasoned sailors insist that what they heard bore no resemblance to any known artificial noise. Beyond physical explanations, there is a strong cultural dimension to the cries of the Strait. In traditional Malaysian and Indonesian folklore, there are tales of the Hanta Lot, sea spirits that inhabit the oceans and sometimes mimic human voices to lure the living to their deaths. These stories warn fishermen never to follow disembodied voices at sea, especially if they seem to come from nowhere. Some believe the cries could be the souls of those who died tragically in shipwrecks, naval battles, or acts of piracy. For centuries, the Strait of Malacca was the stage for bloody confrontations between empires, corsairs, and merchants. The water that now appears serene has, in truth, been a silent witness to countless human tragedies. In modern times, certain incidents have reignited the legend. In 2007, the crew of an oil tanker reported hearing cries and knocking sounds coming from the water near their hull as they sailed slowly at night. They found nothing, no boats, no debris, no signals on proximity radars. Subsequent investigations could offer no conclusive explanation. For them, it was an experience as bewildering as it was terrifying. Another documented case occurred in 2013, when a group of fishermen recounted how, in the middle of the night, a series of heartbreaking screams rose from directly beneath their boat. Peering into the water, they saw nothing, but the sound persisted for several minutes. Some described a chilling sensation of being watched, which prompted them to retreat hastily from the area. Amid all these stories, scientists have tried to offer more conventional explanations. Some studies suggest that abrupt changes in water surface temperature can create sound vortices, where vibrations from distant sources are distorted and seem to erupt suddenly in the middle of the sea. Others point to the possibility of submarine seismic activity producing peculiar noises. The Strait of Malacca lies near the Sunda subduction zone, a region highly active in tectonic terms. Underwater plate movements could provoke acoustic emissions that, under certain circumstances, sound like groans or muffled explosions. However, none of these explanations completely fits the subjective experience of those who have encountered the phenomenon. For those who have heard the cries of the Strait of Malacca, it is not simply a matter of strange noises. They speak of a tangible anguish within the sound, as if capturing a genuine echo of suffering lost at sea. Today, despite technological advances, the mystery persists. Underwater audio recordings in the Strait have captured acoustic anomalies, but they rarely match the intensity of the screams described in testimonies. Most experienced captains prefer not to speak much about the matter. For them, to acknowledge the existence of such sounds would be to admit that there are things at sea that we still do not fully understand. The Strait of Malacca remains vital to global trade, but beneath its seemingly controlled surface, it hides a history of death, conflict, and forgotten tragedies. Perhaps the cries that occasionally rise are not ghosts or hallucinations. Perhaps they are simply the ocean's way of remembering everything. And on those misty nights, when the wind dies down and the sea turns into a dark mirror, the cries emerge once more, reminding anyone who listens that the ocean, no matter how well navigated, has never been fully conquered. The North Sea Voyager, the abandoned yacht adrift at sea. Sometimes, the most unsettling mysteries are not accompanied by violence, storms, or visible tragedy. Sometimes, it is a ship found adrift, completely abandoned yet in almost perfect condition, that raises far more disturbing questions than any apparent disaster ever could. Such is the case of the North Sea Voyager, a luxury yacht discovered in pristine condition, but utterly deserted. The event occurred in 2010, when a cargo ship crossing the North Sea detected a small object adrift on its radar, one that did not appear on any navigation charts. As they drew closer, the crew spotted an elegant white yacht, about 14 meters long, drifting in slow, lazy circles, carried only by the currents. From a distance, there seemed to be no damage. The hull was intact, the sails furled neatly, the windows unbroken. It looked, at a glance, as though the yacht had only just set sail. The true shock came when they boarded her. There was no one aboard. An initial inspection revealed a scene even more perplexing. The galley showed signs of recent use. Dirty dishes sat in the sink, a coffee pot still held the cold remains of brewed coffee, and provisions were stored neatly in their compartments. The beds were made, clothing hung carefully in closets, and the navigation documents were laid out methodically on the captain's table. Every detail suggested that, until quite recently, the yacht had been actively inhabited by its crew. The engine was off but fully operational. There were no signs of struggle, no structural damage, and no evidence of forced boarding. The communication devices were disconnected but still in working condition. What was missing more than anything else was the people. A closer search revealed no life jackets and no auxiliary lifeboats. The GPS system showed that the yacht had been heading northward on a steady course until, about 48 hours before discovery, it had begun to drift erratically, as if someone or something had abruptly deactivated the autopilot. There had been no recorded distress signals, no emergency calls. The official investigation soon revealed that the yacht had been rented from a German port for a week-long pleasure cruise. On board were 3 individuals: the yacht's owner, his wife, and a close friend. Port records confirmed that they had departed under favorable weather conditions, with no complications. No one had seen or heard from them since. The first theory proposed was that of an accident. Perhaps all 3 had fallen overboard due to a careless maneuver or a sudden rogue wave. However, the state of the boat and the calm weather of previous days contradicted this hypothesis. Conditions had been stable, moderate winds, low waves, nothing that would suggest imminent danger. Piracy was also considered, though unlikely. The North Sea is not known for pirate activity, and there were no signs of violence or robbery. Cash and valuables remained untouched on board. Others speculated that the crew might have voluntarily abandoned the vessel for reasons unknown. But why would they desert a safe yacht, without sending a distress call, and leaving all their belongings behind? The only unusual clue emerged from examining the ship's electronic devices. The GPS history revealed a strange alteration in the yacht's path shortly before it began drifting. Rather than maintaining a straight course, the boat had started making slow, erratic turns, suggesting that the autopilot had been manually turned off. Moreover, in the ship's logbook, there was a final, hastily written entry, cryptic and chilling. "Something in the water. We can't identify it." No further explanation was found in the log. Just that single line, scribbled with a trembling hand, dated the day before the yacht was discovered. That one fragment of writing opened the door to far darker theories. Some suggested that the yacht might have encountered a submerged object, perhaps a lost shipping container, a wounded whale, or even a natural phenomenon such as a sudden whirlpool. A violent collision or abrupt jolt could have thrown the occupants overboard. Yet, the hull showed no damage, and there were no impact marks to indicate any collision. Others ventured into more fantastic territory. Had they encountered a sea creature, or some undocumented phenomenon, such as a sudden release of methane gas from the seabed capable of destabilizing the yacht and disorienting those on deck? Though such ideas tread close to speculation, they are not entirely impossible. Methane gas releases are known to lower water density, potentially causing small vessels to lose buoyancy abruptly. However, in the case of the North Sea Voyager, no geological anomalies were detected in the surrounding area. The most widely accepted theory among official investigators suggests a chain of unfortunate events. Perhaps one crew member fell overboard accidentally, and the others, in a desperate attempt to rescue them, abandoned the yacht without properly securing it, leaving all three lost at sea with no way to return. And yet, this explanation fails to account for the eerie final note in the logbook, and for the absence of any emergency signals. To this day, the bodies have never been found. Maritime authorities eventually closed the case without reaching a definitive conclusion. The yacht was towed back to port and later sold to a new owner, though many initially refused to purchase it, fearing that it was cursed. The North Sea Voyager, as it was nicknamed by the press, became a symbol of how, even in modern times and seemingly safe waters, the sea remains an unpredictable and merciless domain. The combination of unexplained abandonment, the pristine condition of the boat, and that final chilling entry in the logbook make this case one of the strangest mysteries in recent European maritime history. Today, the yacht's new owner claims to have sailed her without incident, but among the maritime community, whispers persist. Whispers suggesting that the sea never fully returns what it claims. The Marfa lights over the water phenomena no one can explain. The phenomenon of the Marfa lights has fascinated generations in the state of Texas, United States, where, shimmering across the vast desert plains, these mysterious lights have puzzled scientists, locals, and visitors alike for over a century. However, in recent years, reports have emerged describing similar occurrences along coastal regions, particularly over open seas, places where no visible light sources should exist, suggesting that the Marfa lights have perhaps found a new, more haunting stage to perform upon, the endless solitude of the ocean. It all began to be documented in the early 2000s, when captains of deep-sea fishing vessels began reporting strange lights in remote sectors of the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean. These lights, they said, varied in color, mostly white, blue, and yellow, and floated just a few meters above the surface of the water, moving erratically, accelerating, pausing, or simply vanishing as if they had never been there at all. Despite being scattered across vast distances, the sailors' accounts shared unsettling common details. The lights seemed to show a peculiar interest in the ships, sometimes approaching them, other times fleeing at incredible speed. They produced no noise whatsoever. They failed to appear on radar and did not correspond to any known aircraft, buoys, or nearby vessels. A recurring feature was that these lights often appeared on especially dark nights, when a new moon left the sky nearly empty of visual reference points. Some witnesses even claimed the lights seemed to play around the ships, while others described feeling an overpowering sensation of being watched. What could possibly explain these mysterious appearances? One of the first explanations suggested was that of will-o'-the-wisps, spontaneous combustions of gases like methane, emanating from the depths of the ocean. While such phenomena are known to occur in swampy regions, the idea that they could happen far out at sea, and with such speed and height, was quickly dismissed by most experts. Others pointed toward reflections of distant land-based lights, refracted over the sea by layers of atmospheric thermal inversion. This might explain sightings near the coast, but not the ones occurring hundreds of kilometers from the nearest shore, where many of these incidents were reported. In 2008, a scientific expedition was organized to study these phenomena in the North Atlantic. Armed with infrared cameras and electromagnetic field detectors, the researchers set out to capture hard evidence. One night, the team reported witnessing bright flashes at close range. However, The recordings only captured scattered variations of ambient light, and the instruments registered no significant electromagnetic anomalies. The inability to document the phenomenon conclusively only deepened the mystery. Some scientists proposed that extreme cases of marine bioluminescence could be the cause. Certain types of plankton, algae, and bacteria are capable of emitting light when disturbed. Yet, the color intensity, erratic movements, and behavior of the reported lights did not match the typically uniform, bluish glow of known bioluminescence. With conventional explanations growing weaker, more speculative theories began to take root. Some independent researchers have suggested the possibility of static energy discharges in the atmosphere, known as sprites or elves, luminous phenomena that occur at high altitudes and are typically associated with thunderstorms. But the open sea lights have been witnessed under clear skies, far from any storm activity. Others, leaning toward more paranormal interpretations, have speculated that these lights might represent visits from other dimensions, unidentified craft, or energetic manifestations that modern science is still unequipped to categorize. As for the sailors who have witnessed these lights firsthand, their testimonies vary in detail but converge on one essential truth. The lights did not seem accidental or natural. Some claim to have seen them dancing over the waves for minutes before vanishing into the darkness. Others describe them moving in circles around their vessels, almost as if inspecting them. There are even cases where the lights reportedly vanished the moment powerful spotlights were shown in their direction. In 2015, a particularly chilling incident was reported by the captain of a cargo ship. While navigating through the Atlantic, he observed 4 lights arranged in a diamond formation just above the water's surface. Thinking they might be emergency flares from a vessel in distress, he changed course to investigate. However, as he drew closer, the lights began to move together, maintaining their formation while pulling away at a speed impossible for any human craft. After several minutes of futile pursuit, the lights simply extinguished themselves, vanishing into the void. The report was filed and archived without any satisfactory explanation, much like many other maritime phenomena that stubbornly defy logical analysis. In recent years, technological advancements have allowed for slightly better recordings of similar phenomena. Marine drones, high-sensitivity cameras, and smart buoys have occasionally captured flashes of light over the deep ocean. But the quality of these images, hindered by distance, water movement, and weather conditions, still leaves far too many questions unanswered. The phenomenon of lights over the water continues to spread, both in the number of reports and in their geographical range. Beyond the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico, sightings have also been recorded in the Sea of Japan, the Indian Ocean, and the South Pacific. Are we witnessing a global phenomenon that we are only beginning to recognize? Or is this a sum of extraordinary optical illusions, unknown bioluminescent processes, and atmospheric anomalies beyond our current understanding? For now, no one knows for sure. Meanwhile, those who spend their nights sailing the vast, dark expanses of the oceans understand that, every so often, they might glimpse lights with no known origin, lights that dance upon the waves, illuminating the surface for a fleeting moment, before disappearing into the deep night as mysteriously as they came. The legend of the Palatine light, the burning ship that never dies. Off the coast of Rhode Island, in the northeastern United States, lies Block Island, a small landmass steeped in maritime history, where peaceful beaches and rugged cliffs conceal one of the Atlantic's most enduring legends. The Palatine light, a mysterious flame that, according to countless witnesses even today, dances upon the waters. An eternal fire that, they say, never truly goes out. The origins of the story trace back to the 18th century, when a ship named the Palatine set sail from Europe toward the New World. The Palatine was an emigrant vessel, carrying men, women, and children of German origin, fleeing war, poverty, and persecution in their homeland, seeking hope and new beginnings across the vast Atlantic. From the very outset, the voyage was marked by suffering. Conditions aboard were deplorable. Overcrowding, rampant disease, and starvation ravaged the passengers. According to various accounts, the captain treated them not as human beings but as mere cargo, selling off their food supplies at ports along the way for his own profit. By the time the ship neared the shores of New England in the bitter winter of 1738, after months adrift at sea, the suffering had reached unbearable levels. Yet, salvation was not to be found. Instead, a ferocious winter storm battered the Palatine, driving it helplessly toward the treacherous waters surrounding Block Island, infamous for their hidden rocks and deadly currents. What happened next remains shrouded in conflicting accounts. Some say that the islanders, seeing the stranded vessel, rushed to aid the doomed passengers, risking their own lives in the attempt. Others tell a much darker tale, that the residents of Block Island practiced wrecking, luring ships to destruction with false lights on the shore, simulating the safety of a harbor to cause shipwrecks and loot their remains. Regardless of the truth, the outcome was catastrophic. The Palatine struck the rocks violently, splintering apart under the relentless waves. Many passengers drowned or were crushed by the collapsing timbers. Some survivors were said to have been rescued or captured, depending on which version of the story you believe, while others simply vanished into the frozen sea. Among the passengers, legend speaks of a woman known only as the Lady of the Palatine, who, overcome by terror, grief, or madness, refused to leave the doomed ship. Wrapped in a white blanket, she was seen screaming atop the flaming wreck as the ocean consumed it. A vision so harrowing that it would be etched into the collective memory of Block Island forever. Since then, generations of islanders and passing sailors have reported sightings of the Palatine light. A floating flame hovering above the sea, sometimes taking the ghostly form of a burning ship, other times appearing as a solitary, glowing orb. The sightings occur most often on cold, misty winter nights, when the weather conspires to create a landscape of eerie shadows. While skeptics argue that illusions are common under such conditions, many witnesses, including seasoned captains, tourists, and lifelong fishermen, insist that what they have seen cannot be dismissed so easily. By the 19th century, the Palatine light had become so famous that it inspired poems, ballads, and countless local tales. American poet John Greenleaf Whittier immortalized the legend in his poem The Palatine, evoking the terrifying image of the burning ship returning again and again to the site of its destruction, unable to rest. Scientific explanations, of course, were soon proposed. One suggested the phenomenon might be St. Elmo's fire, a luminous plasma discharge caused by atmospheric electricity, often seen on ships' masts during storms. But St. Elmo's fire typically glows blue or violet, not the fiery red and orange hues described by those who have witnessed the Palatine light. Other researchers pointed to atmospheric reflections or mirages, conditions where lights from distant ships could be refracted by layers of warm and cold air, creating distorted images that seem to float above the horizon. Yet, many of the recorded sightings occurred when no other vessels were visible for miles around. Another hypothesis involves intense marine bioluminescence, where disturbances in the water could cause plankton and microorganisms to emit light. While plausible in theory, the vivid image of a ship-like blaze floating above the sea does not align neatly with known bioluminescent behavior. The most haunting possibility, and the one most cherished by those who keep the legend alive, is that the Palatine light is a residual apparition, an imprint of trauma so intense that it has carved itself into the very fabric of the place, replaying the final desperate moments of the Palatine for eternity. Supporting this interpretation are countless testimonies. Residents who claim to have heard ghostly screams echoing from the sea, or to have seen the fleeting silhouette of a woman moving through the flames, reaching out toward the unseen shore in a desperate plea for rescue. In 1969, a team of paranormal investigators spent a week on Block Island in hopes of capturing evidence of the Palatine light. On several nights, they reported seeing unexplained lights over the water. Though their photographic and recording equipment failed to capture the phenomena clearly, the testimonies they gathered from local witnesses were remarkably consistent in describing the color, size, and movement of the mysterious flames. Today, more than 280 years after the shipwreck, the Palatine light remains a living part of Rhode Island's folklore. Each year, curious tourists visit Block Island hoping to catch a glimpse of the phantom flames that, for so many, continue to serve as a chilling reminder of the tragedy that befell the Palatine. Some leave disappointed, having seen nothing but endless waves and mist. Others depart convinced that they witnessed something beyond explanation. Yet all who stand at the cliff's edge, gazing into the immense, indifferent sea, feel the heavy presence of history, knowing that somewhere out there, on a cold winter's night long ago, a ship was lost to darkness and fire. And though the Palatine sank centuries ago, for those who believe in the persistence of human suffering in the places where it unfolded, that burning ship never truly finished sinking. The mystery of the Baychimo, the ghost trapped in the ice. In the frozen reaches of the Canadian Arctic, where temperatures plummet so low that time itself seems to freeze along with the desolate landscape, the legend circulates of a ship that, for decades, wandered adrift among the ice floes, surviving storms, vanishing into the mist, only to reappear like a stubborn phantom determined never to rest. That ship was the Baychimo, a steam-powered cargo vessel that, after its abandonment in 1931, continued sailing without a crew for more than 30 years. The Baychimo was built in 1914 in Sweden and, after changing ownership multiple times, ended up under the control of the Hudson's Bay Company, the historic trading organization that dominated commerce across much of northern Canada. Its primary mission was to transport furs and goods between remote trading posts and larger centers of civilization. In the fall of 1931, the Baychimo found itself along the Beaufort Sea coast near Point Barrow, Alaska, completing its usual route. As the season advanced, the ship became trapped in the ice faster than anticipated. The crew attempted to free her, but the ice grew thicker and more unyielding with every passing day. They were forced to evacuate, moving to makeshift shelters on land to try to survive the brutal Arctic winter. For weeks, the men watched helplessly as the Baychimo became increasingly locked in the ice, resigning themselves to the idea that they had lost the vessel forever to the merciless forces of nature. Then, a particularly fierce storm descended on the region, blinding them with snow and winds that raged for days, obscuring the ship entirely from view. When the weather finally cleared, the Baychimo was gone. It was assumed she had been crushed by the shifting ice and had sunk to the bottom of the frozen sea. Yet only days later, Inuit hunters reported seeing the Baychimo floating freely, several kilometers away from where it had been abandoned. Though damaged, the ship was still afloat, defying expectations. Members of the Hudson's Bay Company soon located the vessel again. After inspecting her condition, they judged that she was too battered and fragile to be salvaged. They withdrew, leaving the Baychimo to the mercy of the ocean, the wind, and the ever-shifting ice. What no one anticipated was that the Baychimo would refuse to sink. Instead, she would survive the passage of time, becoming an errant ghost of the ice, a real, tangible vessel that continued to drift silently through the Arctic for decades. In the years that followed, sporadic reports began to surface of ships and expeditions sighting the Baychimo, trapped in ice or floating slowly along the polar currents. Sometimes she was seen coated in snow and rime, her corroded hull and leaning masts cloaked in white, moving soundlessly through the northern mists like a lost soul searching for a home. Unlike classic ghost ships, the Baychimo was no apparition. She was real, steel and timber weathered by time and the cruelty of the Arctic. Her very existence seemed to defy logic. How could an abandoned, aging ship survive for so long in one of the harshest environments on Earth? On several occasions, expeditions managed to board her. In 1933, a group of Inuit hunters climbed aboard the Baychimo and salvaged goods still stored in her cargo holds. In 1939, another expedition tried to tow her back to port, but the operation failed when the unpredictable movement of the ice made it impossible. Every year, new sightings placed the Baychimo in different parts of the Arctic, sometimes hundreds of kilometers from her last known position. It was as if the ship had a will of her own, refusing to be claimed by the ice, gliding among the floes, disappearing into the fog, and re-emerging weeks or months later, spotted by whalers, explorers, or even reconnaissance planes. In 1962, 31 years after her abandonment, the Baychimo was sighted once more. Those who saw her reported that although she was severely deteriorated, she still floated, an indomitable survivor in a place where even modern ships often succumb quickly to the elements. After 1969, the sightings ceased. The last reported observation placed the Baychimo trapped in thick pack ice, far from any major shipping lanes. It is presumed that she was finally crushed by the relentless pressure of the ice or sank into the depths of the Arctic Ocean. Yet no wreckage has ever been found, and thus the Baychimo disappeared as mysteriously as she had lived. The story of the Baychimo became a living legend among mariners and the native peoples of the North. Her drifting silhouette was seen as a symbol of resilience, a stubborn defiance against the overwhelming forces of nature. Some even dubbed her the Flying Dutchman of the Arctic, an inevitable analogy to the mythical ghost ship doomed to sail forever. But unlike the cursed legends of old, the Baychimo was real, a series of improbable survivals woven into the fabric of Arctic history. Modern attempts to locate her remains using underwater scanning technologies have met with failure. The shifting ice, the immense size of the region, and the instability of the seabed make any search a daunting challenge. Even today, among the stories told by polar explorers and sailors, the Baychimo lives on, spoken of in hushed tones, as a warning and a reminder that in the Arctic, man and his creations are but fragile visitors, and sometimes what we abandon refuses to rest. For those who believe in the enduring power of maritime lore, the Baychimo is still out there, somewhere, gliding silently through the northern mists, frozen in time, awaiting the day when she might once again be seen by some unsuspecting traveler, wandering alone between the ice and the endless gray sky. The mystery of the vanished Atlantis too deep, the seafloor that changes. In the heart of the Red Sea, between the shores of Arabia and Africa, there lies a submarine region as enigmatic as it is dangerous. Known as the Atlantis too deep, this abyssal depression has, since its discovery, baffled scientists and sailors alike. Here, in the deepest reaches, the seafloor does not behave as it should. It shifts, it moves, it conceals itself. And most disturbingly of all, parts of it have mysteriously vanished. The modern story of the Atlantis too deep began in the 1960s, when international oceanographic expeditions, searching for new trade routes, mineral resources, and strategic points, explored the Red Sea. It was during these missions that instruments first detected something unusual: a vast underwater basin, much deeper than the surrounding seabed, filled with abnormally hot and highly saline water. Unlike typical rocky seafloor, the Atlantis too deep was a kind of hypersaline lake trapped at the bottom of the sea. The waters within it, isolated from the general ocean currents, reached temperatures exceeding 60 degrees Celsius and had salinity levels up to 10 times higher than the global ocean average. For scientists, it was as if they had discovered an ocean within an ocean, a radically different ecosystem existing under extreme conditions. Further exploration revealed something even more fascinating: enormous deposits of heavy metals. Gold, silver, manganese, and other minerals had accumulated in the sediments of the Atlantis too deep over millennia, forming a hidden treasure trove whose potential wealth was incalculable. But soon enough, mystery began to cloud the scientific excitement. When attempts were made to map the basin's floor with precision, the data began to reveal perplexing anomalies. Zones previously registered as rich in metals appeared suddenly barren. Sedimentary formations that should have remained static showed signs of having shifted or altered. In some instances, entire regions of the seafloor seemed to vanish from the records, as if they had been buried, eroded, or swallowed by the sea itself. At first, these discrepancies were attributed to measurement errors. Sonar technology, though advanced for its time, was far from perfect. Yet the differences were too large, too significant, to be dismissed as mere technical faults. Later, in the mid-1970s, a joint research project between Saudi Arabia and neighboring countries attempted to extract minerals from the Atlantis too deep. Again, they found that the anticipated concentrations of resources no longer matched previous surveys. It was as if the seafloor itself had changed between missions. Geological studies provided some initial explanations. The Red Sea lies atop an area of intense tectonic activity, a rift zone where the African and Arabian plates are slowly pulling apart, creating new oceanic crust. The Atlantis too deep could thus be affected by micro-earthquakes, magma intrusions, and sediment shifts driven by hydrothermal currents. All these processes might account for changes in its structure. Yet the rate and scale of the transformations observed did not fully align with this theory. The speed at which entire zones seemed to morph was astonishing, and the absence of corresponding seismic activity left more questions than answers. A bolder theory suggests that Atlantis too deep might harbor still unknown geothermal processes, where interactions between mineral flows and subterranean layers could generate collapse, displacement, and regeneration of the seafloor at unprecedented speeds. If true, the Atlantis too deep would not merely be a repository of wealth but a living geological laboratory, constantly evolving before our limited understanding. Other, more speculative explanations have also surfaced. Some researchers have proposed that sudden emissions of superheated fluids, similar to hydrothermal vents found along mid-ocean ridges, might be responsible. These vents can rapidly deposit or erode mineral structures in a matter of weeks or months, reshaping the seafloor dramatically. If the Atlantis too deep hosts such an active system, it would be among the most intense and dynamic ever discovered. Meanwhile, among the crews of the early expeditions, darker rumors circulated. Some sailors spoke of seeing strange emanations of light beneath the water, phenomena described as flashes or bluish glows rising from the depths. Though never officially documented, these stories fueled the notion that something more, something not yet fully understood, was unfolding beneath the waves. In 2016, a modern oceanographic expedition using autonomous underwater vehicles revisited the Atlantis too deep. Their findings were just as unsettling. Metal concentrations varied more wildly than expected, and the images captured revealed recent morphological changes to the seafloor. Vast masses of sediment appeared to have been displaced within surprisingly short spans of time. Perhaps most disconcerting of all was the realization that some regions mapped decades earlier no longer existed in their original form. Had they been buried, washed away, absorbed by unknown forces? The lack of permanent access and the extreme environmental conditions make continuous study nearly impossible. Scorching temperatures, crushing pressures, and corrosive salinity levels turn Atlantis too deep into a hostile realm for both human researchers and their delicate instruments. Every expedition is costly, brief, and technologically limited. For these reasons, Atlantis too deep remains one of the least understood regions on Earth. To scientists, it represents a tantalizing opportunity, a chance to observe geological processes that could rewrite much of what we assume about the dynamic nature of marine environments. Yet for others, it stands as a stark reminder of how little we truly control or comprehend the hidden world beneath the ocean's surface. And there, in the depths invisible to human eyes, the seafloor continues to change. One day, it may be a shimmering expanse of mineral-rich sediments. The next, it could transform into a barren wasteland of mud, or a deadly trap of crystallized salts. Hidden beneath kilometers of saltwater and centuries of ignorance, Atlantis too deep guards its secrets fiercely. And perhaps, like so many corners of the ocean, it prefers to keep them hidden just a little longer. The case of the Kaz II, the sailboat found intact but empty. In April of 2007, the Kaz II, a 12-meter catamaran, set sail from Airlie Beach on the northeast coast of Australia, bound for Townsville, about 500 kilometers away. On board were 3 men: Peter Tunstead, his brother John, and their close friend Derek Batten. They were experienced at sea, though not professional sailors, and had planned a leisurely voyage, hoping to enjoy the mild weather and the breathtaking beauty of the Great Barrier Reef. Nothing suggested that their trip would soon become one of the strangest maritime mysteries of modern times. 3 days after their departure, the Kaz II was spotted by a maritime surveillance helicopter. From the air, everything appeared normal. The vessel was moving slowly under motor power, sailing in a straight line. Its sails were raised but torn, flapping weakly in the breeze. However, something immediately drew the pilot's attention. There was no one visible on deck. The Coast Guard boarded the Kaz II shortly afterward, expecting to find the crew below deck or perhaps injured. What they discovered was far more unsettling. The boat was completely empty. The engine was still running, the navigation system operated normally, the radio was switched on and tuned to an emergency channel, but there were no signs of struggle or structural damage anywhere. On the main saloon table, a meal was laid out unfinished. One of the onboard laptops contained a video recorded just hours earlier, showing the three men smiling, relaxed, fishing on deck under a radiant sun. Life jackets were stored neatly in their compartments, the emergency rafts had not been deployed, and all the safety equipment remained stowed. Everything indicated that the crew had abandoned the boat abruptly and without preparation, an act that defied all common sense at sea. Theories began to emerge immediately. The first hypothesis proposed was that of an accident. Perhaps one of the men fell overboard while handling a fishing rod or the sails, and the other two jumped in to rescue him. Yet how to explain that none managed to return to the boat, especially given the relatively calm sea conditions? Another theory suggested a sudden change in the weather. Although there had been intermittent gusts of wind that day, no significant storms were recorded in the area. Some experts speculated that a loose sail might have struck a crew member, causing him to fall, but the visible damage to the sails did not match an event of violent impact. There was also discussion of a possible hostile boarding, yet there were no signs of violence, no valuables missing, and no evidence of modern piracy in that region at the time. A puzzling clue emerged when analyzing the navigation instruments. The GPS indicated that the Kaz II had followed an erratic path after a certain point, as if adrift without human input to adjust the course. This suggested that the vessel had probably been sailing alone for at least 24 hours before it was spotted. Another anomaly was found in the sails. They were torn irregularly, as though they had failed while the boat was under the influence of strong winds without anyone actively managing them. This supported the idea that, at the moment of the damage, there was no one on board to respond. An additional detail that puzzled investigators was the discovery of a mooring rope trailing into the water, as if it had been tied to something, or someone, that fell overboard. Could it be that one of the crew members had become entangled and was pulled into the sea, prompting a desperate rescue attempt by the others? In improvised rescue situations, it is common for adrenaline to drive impulsive decisions. Jumping into the water without protection, without broadcasting a distress call, without securing a safe return point. And at sea, just a few minutes are enough for a boat, pushed by wind and current, to drift beyond reach even for strong swimmers. The official report by the Australian police concluded that the most probable cause was a chain of accidents. One crew member fell overboard, the other two attempted a rescue but failed, and the boat was left to navigate alone without anyone at the helm. However, even this explanation does not resolve all the inconsistencies. Why did no one activate the emergency radio before jumping into the sea? Why did three men, experienced albeit not professional sailors, fail to use their life jackets, knowing that an improvised rescue at sea could be fatal? Why was a meal still laid out, as if their disappearance had been sudden and completely unexpected even to themselves? These unanswered questions have kept the mystery of the Kaz II alive in the public imagination. In maritime tradition, the sight of an empty vessel is especially unsettling. A deserted sailboat, without signs of violence or obvious damage, floating silently over calm waters, embodies the ultimate enigma of seafaring. A space where the familiar human order, eating, working, traveling, is violently interrupted by the inexplicable. The Kaz II, found in perfect condition yet bereft of its crew, evokes the memory of the legendary Mary Celeste, another ship discovered under similar circumstances in the 19th century. Both cases share that haunting sensation of interrupted stories, of lives suddenly erased mid-journey, leaving behind only traces of the routine that had just been shattered. Today, the Kaz II no longer exists. The boat was eventually towed and later dismantled. But the story endures. For Australian sailors, the name Kaz II still evokes a silent warning about human vulnerability in the face of the vast and unpredictable sea. No testimony, no distress signal, no recovered bodies. Only a lone vessel, sailing under the tropical sun, while the ocean, true to its timeless nature, quietly claimed its secrets once again. The Milwaukee Deep Abyss, the deepest hole in the Atlantic. In the vast and often forgotten North Atlantic, where gray waves crash relentlessly and the winds whisper ancient stories, there exists a place few have ever heard of, yet it holds one of the ocean's most impressive secrets, the Milwaukee Deep Abyss, a hole in the seabed so profound that, for a long time, it was considered the deepest point in the entire Atlantic Ocean. Discovered in 1939 by the American ship USS Milwaukee during a reconnaissance mission, the abyss is located within the Puerto Rico Trench, about 135 kilometers north of the island. When the first sonar readings detected the abyssal depth, more than 8,380 meters, the scientists and officers on board could hardly believe what they were seeing. The Atlantic, already revered for its vastness, was revealing that it also concealed zones as deep as they were mysterious. But it wasn't just the depth that was so disconcerting. It was the nearly vertical nature of its walls and the strange echoes returned by the sonar, as if the bottom were not entirely solid. From the very first moment, the Milwaukee Deep was regarded as a place outside the normal order. Over the years, several expeditions tried to map the trench and better understand its characteristics. Initial descents, conducted with echo sounders, revealed irregular profiles, shifting depths, unstable walls, unknown formations. Every measurement offered a different figure, as if the seafloor itself was moving. One of the most intriguing aspects is that the Milwaukee Deep lies in a region of high seismic activity. The Puerto Rico Trench marks the boundary between the African and Caribbean tectonic plates, making it prone to undersea earthquakes and massive landslides. These constant movements would partly explain the instability of the abyss's structure, but not entirely. Some expedition records report magnetic anomalies detected near the abyss. These irregular magnetic fields interfered with navigation and communication instruments, creating an even more hostile environment for any attempt at precise exploration. Moreover, on several occasions, research submarines sent to the area reported strange sounds. Sharp knocks, deep vibrations, and acoustic patterns that did not correspond to typical geological movements or any known marine fauna. Although many of these recordings have been archived as unidentified natural phenomena, the lack of clear correlation with seismic or biological events keeps the questions wide open. The abyss has also been linked to numerous accounts of ships disappearing in the region without a trace. Although the trench does not lie within the infamous Bermuda Triangle, its rough waters, unpredictable currents, and vast unexplored reaches have fostered a quiet reputation for invisible tragedies. Marine researchers point out that near the Milwaukee Deep, shifts in pressure and currents can be so violent that small vessels may be thrown off course in minutes, often without their crews realizing it until it is far too late. But perhaps one of the greatest enigmas associated with the Milwaukee Deep emerged in 2012, during an international oceanographic mapping expedition. Using high-definition multi-beam sonar technology, scientists detected a perfectly rectangular formation at around 7,800 meters deep, near the abyss floor. Initial measurements suggested a structure about 150 meters long by 60 meters wide, with strikingly straight angles and flat surfaces. Speculation erupted immediately. Could this be a natural formation? Or did it point to the presence of artificial structures in one of the most inaccessible places on Earth? The scientific community responded with skepticism, pointing out that in submarine geology, seemingly regular shapes can occur through fractures, erosion, and mineral deposit processes. But the captured image, blurry, yet clearly geometric, opened the door to bolder theories. Remains of prehistoric civilizations, hidden bases, unknown constructions. The truth is that no unmanned vehicle has yet been able to reach the exact bottom of the abyss safely. The pressure at that depth, over 800 times atmospheric pressure at sea level, is so crushing that only a handful of vessels in the world can withstand it. The combination of tectonic instability, magnetic anomalies, unexplained sounds, and rectilinear structures has turned the Milwaukee Deep into a blind spot of modern scientific exploration. Despite technological advances, less than 10% of the world's seabed has been mapped in high resolution, and the Milwaukee Deep remains among the least explored and most hostile places in the Atlantic. Some researchers have proposed an exclusive mission to study the abyss with new-generation underwater drones capable of withstanding extreme pressures. However, the costs, the risks, and the logistical difficulties have indefinitely postponed any serious project. Meanwhile, the Milwaukee Deep remains there, hidden beneath kilometers of black water, indifferent to humanity's efforts to uncover its secrets. For sailors crossing those latitudes, Knowing that beneath their hulls lies an unfathomable void adds a special undertone to their journey, a latent awareness of how small we are in the face of nature's vast forces. The abyss does not signal, nor does it call for attention. It simply exists, a dark well at the bottom of the world, waiting patiently for someone brave enough to dare to look into its depths again. Maybe someday, when technology permits, we will descend and uncover its secrets. Or perhaps, like so many other places in the ocean, the Milwaukee Deep will remain part of the sea's eternal mystery. And that's it for today's video. The sea continues to hide more questions than answers. And although we have journeyed through its most unsettling mysteries, we have merely brushed the surface. If you'd like to keep exploring the unknown, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. I'll see you on our next voyage into the unexplained.